I want to welcome everyone to the Symantec Mobile Management presentation we're doing today. This is for the new 7.1 release that just came out a couple weeks ago. We're going to be talking about all the new features and doing a demo so you can see everything that's going on with it. So with that said, this is what we'll be covering today. I'll be talking about features at a high level and talking about different, scenarios of how that plays into the real world. We'll be talking about what's new in 7.1, the benefits of using it over some of the other products. And then we'll also be going through a live demo in our environment, and I'll show you what it looks like on the client side with the agent, and also what it looks like on the console side on the server. So I'm going to start off talk a little bit about myself. I'm on the endpoint management team here at ITS. I'm admin Lakata, and I specialize in client management, mobile management, and virtualization. Recently, mobile management has really taken off. It's been getting a lot of interest, especially with the 7.1 release with iOS support. And so I've been leading that initiative on setting up demos, whether they're on-site or in the cloud, and also creating some training documentation to be used internally. I'm also an authorized consultant, like I said, specialized in endpoint management. So a little bit about ITS. We're both a national and platinum partner. We're partner of the year for 2011. We focus on endpoint management and on security solutions from Symantec. We're based in Grand Rapids. I'm based out of Cincinnati right now, and we're an engineer-centric organization. And what that means is, we focus on the engineers that we send out every week. We share a lot of knowledge when they come back, and we focus on getting excellent results and knowledge transfer, setting up good environments, and that kind of thing, making sure you get everything you need. So with that said, there's a few different areas of mobile device management, and so we're going to be focusing today on policy management, but I'll briefly cover some of the other areas. So policy management is going to include security policies, compliance, remediating devices, making sure they meet your standards and your expectations when they're in your environment, or even if they're not in your environment. It's going to include managing the applications on those devices, seeing reports, pushing software, upgrades, that kind of thing, and also provisioning devices, managing the configurations on them, what's available, what's not available, getting them on the network, getting on email, etc. But there's some other areas too that we'll cover at a later presentation. Most of these center around other security offerings, so such as having like a managed PKI for distributing certificates, having the verifying VIP application, which allows you to do kind of like a RSA Secure ID token, but instead it's on your smartphone, and which provides authentication for applications, whether they're in-house or not. And on the information protection side, Symantec DLP, which is the data loss protection, can also protect these devices when they're connected on your network. And there's the PGP encryption solution for that. And there's even a Norton antivirus application that you can get from both the App Store and Android markets. But today, we're going to be focusing on policy management side. And that's what mobile management is designed to address. But we'll be talking more than just this one product. We're going to be talking about the integration into other business processes, other systems you have, because this isn't just a standalone solution in that it can connect into other data sources. It can connect into workflow to automate some of these processes, to provide a front end for requests. And it's it's going to be able to tie into your directory for authentication. So that's one of the major strengths that we'll be covering today is integration into other systems. So we're going to be focusing on iOS because that is the #1 feature that's coming out of the 7.1 release. We now have a native agent for both iPads and iPhones to manage these devices. Mobile management 7.1 also has agents for Windows Mobile and also for Blackberry. And then this winter, the Android agent will be coming out for those. So specifically around iOS, enterprise activation is referring to getting the agent on there, and how do we manage it? So we have a couple options with the agent of how we get it on there. One option is to go through the App Store, and you can actually go out right now if you have an iPhone or iPad with you. Search for Symantec, and one of the first results you'll get back is the Symantec Mobile Management agent. And it's basically, it's going to give you similar functionality to what an agent on a Windows or a Mac machine would, but it's going to be specific to your iPhone or iPad, and that's publicly available. However, we have another option of getting that agent on there, which is we allow you to build your own agent. We basically give you kind of a stripped down source code, and you compile it in Xcode. And what that allows you to do is you're not bound by certain Apple restrictions like you would be if you got the agent from the App Store. So some of those restrictions would include, for instance, checking in from the background. So if someone doesn't have their iPad or iPhone turned on, the agent can still check in from the background if you're using that in-house agent. If you're getting the agent from the App Store, Apple isn't going to allow the agent to do that because we have to play by their rules. Another benefit of using the in-house agent is that you can brand it. You can see on the screenshot here we have like the ITS logo on the bottom of that, but that could be your company's logo. And so when I talk about the mobile library in a second, that's going to become more important to provide a more personalized experience for your end users. So those are the two different options we have for the agent. There's a lot of flexibility in how you get it installed. So the Enterprise App Store is one of the key features of this iOS offering, and basically what it allows you to do is to push and show applications in a library format on the device. And so the idea is that the end user opens up the agent, they see a list of applications that are offered that they can download and install. These applications can either be from the public App Store, or they can be from something that you internally developed in-house that you uploaded your own files to, and you want to distribute it internally. So this is a distribution system for any kind of application for iOS devices. A common question we get is, can a company or organization purchase licenses for their employees and then use mobile management to distribute those programs? And the answer is yes. I don't know if Apple has made it completely available to corporations yet, but it's available on the academic side, and it's called the Volume Purchase Program. Basically what you do is you go to Apple site for that, and you purchase a certain number of licenses. They give you a specific URL to use, and you're able to put that URL into the console, push it out to your users, and then they're able to pull from that license pool that you purchased. So I'll show you an example of where you would put that address and what that looks like on the device once we get into the actual demo. So the mobile library is kind of the sibling to the Enterprise App Store in that it allows you to push out content that's not just applications. So it could be PDFs, spreadsheets, Word documents, videos, YouTube videos, whatever, and it provides a single place for the end user to look in to find this content, They can download it, it'll store it locally, it'll cache it, so therefore if they don't have like an internet connection and they're on the plane, then they can access that content. And another feature of that is that it's securely managed, which I'll talk about in the next slide. So currently with the mobile library, you can target content based on language of the device. So you could say, this is a set of English documents, so it should only go to English devices. This is a set of Spanish documents, so it should only go to devices that are set to Spanish. In the future, in the next release, we're expecting to be able to target specific groups of devices. So you could say, the marketing department will get this set of documents. The sales force will get a separate set of documents. So that's coming in a new version. And configuration management is obviously a big one that everyone requires, which is how do you provision these devices? How do you configure them for your environment? What kind of configurations do you force? What kind of configurations do you not force? And when I get into the demo, I'll show some specific examples, around like Wi-Fi, setting up Exchange accounts, VPN profiles, and that kind of thing. So on the security and compliance side, what we have is a list of options of how you want to restrict the device. So the most common ones are setting a passcode, setting the complexity of it, setting the length of it, when does it expire, when does the device lock. All that is configurable, and you can have different sets of configurations. And so you could have a highly restricted configuration that includes strong passcode, short lockout period. They can't install external apps into the device, something like that. And then you could have another set of configurations that's not as restrictive, and you're able to target devices based on different criteria, which I'll give you some examples of that later. And so another big security feature is being able to do a wipe, and we actually offer 2 different types of wipes, which is erasing the data off the device. The first one, the most common one, is the complete wipe. When you issue that remotely, it basically does a factored reset of the device, and they have to use iTunes to connect to reactivate the device, and all data is completely wiped from the system. Now we have an option of selective wipe, and where this comes in is, for instance, if you have a personal device on the network, and that person is leaving your organization, so you need to remove corporate content, corporate data, email, etc., without harming their 50 gig of music they legitimately purchased. And so the way you do that is any type of email account or content from the mobile library can be completely deleted remotely through a selective wipe. And the idea is that you're able to segregate this personal data from corporate data so that you can target just that corporate data to remove off that device. So compliance enforcement is obviously very important because you can set up all these security policies, but then you have to check to see are they being enforced? What actions would you take if the device is not in compliance with some of these policies? So for instance, jailbreak detection is a common one. You may not allow jailbroken devices on your network, or you may allow them, but you may say, you can connect to Wi-Fi, but we're not going to allow you to have our VPN profile to connect to sensitive systems. And so you can kind of pick and choose what policies apply to what devices based on different criteria, like jailbreak detection. You can check to see if encryption is turned on. You can check to see if policies are enabled. And then based on those different criteria, you can only allow healthy devices on your network, or can only allow them to do certain things on your network. And certificate management, this is very useful if you have any kind of PKI on site, which is a public key infrastructure. So if you manage your own certificates, or if you use like a managed PKI solution, from VeriSign, now part of Symantec. You can push out certificates from here to devices. So for instance, some VPN profiles require certificates, or even different Wi-Fi settings will require that. You can provision those certificates. In the next version, we're expecting to have integration with managed PKI from Symantec. So if you have PKI out in the cloud, that'll be available in a future release. So consolidated management, what this is talking about is the platform itself. And so all of these features I've been talking about are all built on the Symantec Management platform, which is the same platform that Altiris is built on. So this system does not require Altiris, nor does Altiris require this, but they're on the same platform. So if you already have Altiris in your environment, this is just another solution to install and to configure, but you're not having a completely different set of servers being set up like most of the other products you would see for mobile management. Rather, this is something that you can add on to your existing environment. And so what that means is if you're already familiar with the reporting engine and how alerts are monitored and handled in Altiris, you're going to see a lot of similar functionality here. So you're going to be able to create your own reports, use built-in or canned reports on devices, applications installed on them, what users are assigned to them. You're able to collect alerts, send out emails based on these reports or certain triggers. It's not specific on any, or sorry, it's not reliant on any specific mail system. So if you don't have Exchange, you're still going to be able to manage your iOS, Windows Mobile, BlackBerry devices just fine. When we use Exchange, that comes into play for devices that we do not have an agent for. So that would be like WebOS, so like your touchpads or Veer or Prees, and it would also be currently for like Windows Phone 7, that kind of thing. So currently today we have agents for iOS, Windows Mobile, and BlackBerry, and then this winter Android is coming, and so so if you have Exchange, it's an added benefit. You can manage the active sync policies from this console without giving people access to your Exchange environment directly. If you do not have Exchange, or if you don't want to hook into Exchange, you absolutely don't have to do that at all. It's just an added functionality. So the other big benefit of having the platform to manage these devices from is that you have one console to rule them all, so to speak. So you're able to manage iOS, Android, Windows XP, Windows 7, Windows Vista, Mac OS, anything from Tiger up onto Lion now, Red Hat machines. Everything is all from the same console. And why that's important is because now you only have one place to manage your security, your role-based access. And so when you create these roles for people, you could have a mobile device administrator who can only manage mobile devices, or you could have a help desk where they can only issue like lock commands, or even wipe commands, and you can really restrict the functionality based on security that way. And you're not having to deal with separate systems managing all these separate security profiles. So having this all in one environment to report on, to secure against, to manage is a very big feature. And since it is built on the 7.1 SP1 platform, it means it's very scalable. One mobile management server can handle 20,000 mobile devices and 20,000 workstations. So you're usually not going to see that scalability in many other products. And so what that means is reduce costs for infrastructure when you go to roll this out, and simplify management. And another key architecture piece here is workflow integration. I have some examples of that. And I mentioned earlier of being able to tie into existing business processes, or providing a front end for clients, that's going to be critical, because when you're reviewing all these mobile management products, whether you're looking at Symantec or other companies, everyone has to play by Apple's rules. So what that means is, Apple says you can do these sets of commands with the devices, you can collect this type of information from the devices, and that's what we have to do. So it's not what you can manage on the devices, that's going to be very similar, but it's how you're managing it. Are you going to be managing it from a single console? Are you going to be able to automate this? Are you going to be able to create detailed and automated reports off of it? This is where mobile management really shines. I'm going to answer a couple quick questions. Someone asked about Blackberry Support. So I mentioned we have an agent for it. More specifically, how it works is we still rely on the BES, or the Blackberry Enterprise Server, to do most of the management of these Blackberry devices. So what we offer is basically augmented functionality, in that we can gather detailed software, hardware, operating system information off of that device, including like memory usage and that kind of thing, so that you can report against it, against all of your other assets. So it'll be with all your other mobile devices and workstations, etc. But we also offer remote control. Anyone who's done any kind of mobile device support knows that it can be painful, especially on Blackberries, because the menus are changing with each major OS revision, from OS 4 to OS 5 to OS 6. It can be painful to walk people through these menus to configure certain things, and so we allow you to remote control them, whether it's over Wi-Fi or 3G or whatever, and so you can actually see their screen, take screenshots, recording, video recordings, etc. So that's the Blackberry support that we have today. And another question we got was, do we support iOS 5? Yes, so iOS 5 will work today if you connect it into Mobile Management 7.1. There's new features coming out with iOS 5, new management features that are going to be reviewed and probably implemented in a future mobile management release. So those new management features aren't available today, but all the features I'm showing you in this demo are available today for iOS 5. And Android support, we're expecting to come out this winter. There's going to be a beta program, so probably in a couple months or so, I'll be doing another webcast, probably giving a sneak preview of what the Android support will look like. Okay, so what we have here is the main mobile management portal, which is just showing you how many devices we have on here and our licensed information. From here, we can do a breakdown of devices by operating system. You can see most of our devices are on iOS 4. I also have a Blackberry emulator in there, Windows Mobile. This was a touchpad before I returned it to Staples. And someone added an iOS 5 device, so you can see that it works. So a lot of these reports, you can right-click and drill down and view the details. So this is where you can see all the specific devices. ITS has a lot of iPads. Most of our consultants have one. It's great for note-taking and doing architecture designs on. And you can see my device here. Anytime you see a mobile device, typically you can right-click on it to get some actions or to bring up more information. So you can see these are common iOS actions, such as doing a remote lock. Remove MDM is basically our selective wipe. It tells it to uninstall the agent along with all the content in the mobile library and all the profiles, which would include any kind of mail configuration and other corporate data that was sent down through profiles that would get removed. Reset passcode. Obviously, that's an important one to have when you require passcodes, especially if there's any kind of complexity in them. People change them, they forget them. Now you can reset that remotely. Send inventory forces the inventory to be sent, so that's going to include like your installed software information, hardware information, that kind of thing. Update policies, you make a change, you could tell the devices to immediately update. And then wipe devices, that full factory wipe I mentioned earlier, where you would need iTunes to reactivate the device. So just like everything else in the platform, these are treated like assets as well. So if you have ulterior solutions like client management and asset management, you're going to see these as assets, and you'll be able to tie into whatever asset configuration you already have. Okay. You can also define your own actions. This is where you're going to start seeing a lot more customizations and flexibility in the platform. So I spent a few minutes one day and I created one to show a device on Google Maps. And so you can do that on any iOS device, and it's going to show you that device within Google Maps. You can see my exact coordinates, slightly west of Oxford right now. Let's go into the mobile library. So the mobile library is where your your documents, media, applications all get pushed down to your iPad and iPhone. And within this, you have different feeds. Each feed contains different sets of items. Currently, you can target feeds based on language. In the next version, you'll be able to target feeds based on almost any kind of criteria you could think of. So, as I mentioned earlier, you could have a group for like sales devices or marketing devices, and be able to send different applications, different documents to those devices. So let's see what that looks like. So this is an example of a NASA HD application, and you add your information about the application here. So you put in your name, version, author, etc. From here, this is where you specify what type of item this is. So we told it this was an application, and then it's going to ask, okay, where's this application coming from? Commercial means App Store. In-house means you developed it internally. Therefore, you need to actually upload like your IPA, plist files so that the mobile management server can deploy that to the agent, or sorry, to the device. You can target the type of platform. Currently, the mobile library is just for iOS, but you can see there's going to be support for Android and Windows Phone 7 in the future. You can set a minimum platform version, so if you know the application won't work on a certain version, you could set a minimum for that to apply to. So if you know something only works on 5.0, you could set that here, so that way people aren't seeing content that doesn't apply to the devices. You can set a priority for each of these, whether it's a document, media, or even application. If you set it to recommended, it basically flags it next to that item. And so it says it's a recommended item to install. If it's required, it'll send down a pop-up to that device, and it'll alert the user that there's something to be installed, that they should open the agent right away to install that. You can specify your own icons here, and then this is where you link to the iTunes store. Now, earlier in the presentation, I mentioned the volume purchase program, where you can purchase multiple licenses and make those available to your employees. So this is how you would do that. Apple provides you a link which is specific to your license purchase, and this is where you would put that link. You'd put that in here, and that way if someone installs the application from here, it's going to pull from that license pool. Item is featured, basically just makes that like a recommendation. Item is published, allows you to hide certain things. If you're basically in like draft mode, if you don't want to publish it right away, you can leave that unchecked. So an example of a document, let's see here, how about ITS partner videos? You can see this is a media type, and it's just linking to our Vimeo channel, which has recordings of all these videos that we do. And if you haven't noticed, this whole interface here is Silverlight. I believe that's kind of the direction that most of the user interface is going to. So let's take a look at what that looks like on the device itself. So this is my device. You can see this is what the agent looks like. So we're going to click on that. And this is my applications tab down here, which currently you only get through having an in-house agent. If you get the agent through the App Store and install it, you won't have this little applications tab. It would show up under downloads over here. But this is how it's represented to the user, on their side. So if you want to install, I guess we can try installing World of Goo. This is something that Pat, one of our sales engineers, recommends. Oh, well, he recommended a $5 game, so I won't be demoing that install right now, but we can switch back here to the agent. And then the next tab over is where our documents live. So you can have PDF documents, Word documents, anything that iOS supports, you can have in here for viewing. And then once you click on this, you can see it download down here, and then it's going to open it immediately. And then when you're done, just click done, and you're sent back to the agent. And now you can see that this is cached, so that I don't need to be online to open this anymore. And this will always live down here. And so earlier when I was talking about the selective wipe and it removing documents and such that you sent down from the server, this is all that content that would get erased if you were to do a selective wipe. So this is a tab for different videos that you push down. And then this is basically just all recent downloads. So it's just going to show you like the top 6 or so. And then you also have your about screen so that you can put in contact information for the user if they require support. If you're familiar with the Symantec Management Agent on Windows, some of this will look a little familiar, being able to see some more detailed agent information, what it's sending up to the server. And you could resend the inventory real time if you wanted to. And then this is just some internal logs they have available that you can email for troubleshooting purposes. Okay, so we're going to dive into the configuration editor. And this is where you create different configuration profiles to securely manage your devices and also to provision different configurations. I'm going to walk through some of the more common ones. A very common one would be provisioning Exchange profiles. For anyone who's created documentation for the users on how to configure their accounts for Exchange, in some environments this can be a little tricky for them to get all the right settings. And so the idea is that you can configure everything, or at least as much as possible for them, and then leave certain things blank. So for instance, their username, their email address, and password are blank, so it'll prompt them. But everything else, like the server name, SSL configuration, number of days it's synchronized, that's all provided for them. If you have a certificate, you can include that as well. And you can have multiple profiles for these. So if you do have multiple Exchange environments or whatever, you can have several of these and then apply them to different devices. If you're not on Exchange and using IMAP from the iOS device to connect to a system, this is where you can define that. Almost any kind of setting configuration of on iOS can be configured in here. Passcode is obviously one of the more popular ones. This is requiring a simple passcode. A common question we get is how does the encryption work on iOS? So iPads and iPhones come with hardware encryption. The way it's activated is if there's a passcode set on the device. So if you're requiring a passcode, that's going to enable the encryption features at the operating system level in iOS. This is where you set your your lengths, your complexity, how often does it expire, how often does the device lock, history of the passcodes to keep, number of failed attempts before wiping, how often does the device lock, that kind of thing. Restrictions. These are great if you need to restrict some core functionality on the device. So if you don't want to allow them to install applications or take screen captures or use the camera on their iPhone, these are all options here. You can configure specific applications to allow or not allow, and you can say only allow movies like Lion King to be watched, but not anything above G or PG or whatever. So I don't think that usually comes up very often in a corporate setting, but you have that available. VPN profiles. If anyone has configured a complex VPN environment on an iOS device, you'll realize the value of this right away, of being able to provide all these complex settings for your end users, whether it uses passwords or a secure ID token or certificates. All that's available here for you to provision out. One of the examples I mentioned earlier in security compliance, being able to only provision certain configurations to a device based on criteria. So an example of that is, not allowing jailbroken devices to use VPN. So what we would do here is we would only apply this VPN profile to devices that are, secure, or to devices that have a passcode set, or whatever you want. Web clips are little like bookmark shortcuts you may have seen on iPhones and iPads. Allow you to send out a quick bookmark. I'm going to use an example of this in my policy later on to show you how you can target devices based on different criteria. Wi-Fi provisioning, I imagine, is very common. And so another reason why these are important is not just provisioning to the devices, but also removing them from devices. In my example I mentioned earlier with a selective wipe, of being able to remove emails and other corporate data from a device. So when you have this, for instance, this Exchange profile provision to a device, and you do a selective wipe, it's going to remove all these profiles from that device. So if there's content like emails, calendar entries contained within that account, it's going to get removed as well from that after that selective wipe is complete. Okay. So with all these profile options we have, this is how we apply them to devices. If you're familiar with the platform or with Altiris, this is going to look very similar to policies you've already been working with. So here's a very simple one. I created a certificate to push down, and I made that into its own configuration. And so you can add multiple configuration settings in here. You can have as many as you want. You can allow them to remove it or not remove it. You have options up here for that. And then apply to, this is your targeting. This is what allows you to specify which devices get this policy. So this is a very simple one. It's my certificate, so it's only going to my device. So therefore I just have Adam's iPad in there. But if I wanted to add multiple devices, I would just choose all mobile devices, and then you can add these over. But since this is my personal certificate, I'm not going to distribute that. Now if I wanted to send this to a whole group, I mentioned earlier having like a group for like Salesforce, or a group for like marketing. This is where you do that. You'd have a view and a group set up. You could apply a policy to a whole group of devices if you wanted to. And then from there, after you apply that, you can see which devices are actually affected by this policy, and you can turn the policy on and off. If the policy is off, it will be removed from the device next time it checks in. By default, out of the box, the check-in period for a device is every 24 hours, but that's configurable. You could set that to 3 hours if you want. So devices would be checking in for new policies every 3 hours, and it would also be sending their inventory, installed software, GPS coordinates, all that stuff. So here's an example of a policy. I mentioned the CNBC financial application earlier. So what I did here is I added a web clip, which is like a bookmark to here. And then what I did is I created a target, and I called it iPads without the CNBC application. And that was based on software inventory that we're collecting from the machine, or from the device. And so the effect of this policy is that for any machine or any device that does not have this application installed, we essentially push down a shortcut, kind of like an advertisement, to install that application. So if they click on that web clip, they would go and install that application. and then after it gets installed, they fall out of this group, and so they no longer see that shortcut anymore. So it's just kind of a creative example of showing how you could assign policies to devices based on different criteria. So it could be based on software inventory, it could be based on security information, it could be based on what wireless network are they connected to. One thing that I want to try in the future is setting up maybe like parameters for like GPS coordinates and say, if a device is falling within this GPS coordinate range, would then get this certain policy. So when you're building on this management platform, you have all sorts of options available to you of how you're going to manage these devices. So with that said, I mentioned being able to look at all this information on the device. So these are some of the built-in reports that we have access to. So this is like a basic device summary. You can see what platform they're on, what operating system, version, that kind of thing, even their IP address. So let's bring up mine here. So this is the resource manager for my device. These are the same right-click options I showed you earlier. And then I'm going to show you all the data we're collecting from this device. So this is kind of the raw software inventory data, all the applications that are installed, what version they are, etc. So you can report on that. This is some more inventory data that's commonly reported on. So being able to see, is the GPS turned on? Did they accept the EULA? Is there a 3G turned on? Is it jailbroken? Who owns the device? Who is the owner of it? GPS coordinates, memory usage, all that's available to you to create your own reports or to customize reports that are built in. So I'll show you a little bit of the configuration. So I mentioned, when you enroll a device, it's going through Active Directory, and it's optional, as you can see here. And you can choose to allow jailbroken devices or not. You can choose to require EULA. You can disallow certain platforms from being on there. This is where you set the frequency, how often the agent checks in, and that kind of thing. So there's two more things I want to show you in the last 10 minutes we have. The one thing I mentioned earlier on was workflow integration as an example of how this platform really helps you manage mobile devices. So we have a couple workflows that we created. One of them is, for instance, a self-service portal. So basically what this allows you to do is end user can log in here, and it's going to show what devices they own. So once we log in, it's going to show me all the devices enrolled under this account. This is our demo account that we share, so we have a bunch of things in here. But this is my iPad I'm going to choose. And from here, so let's say someone lost the device at an airport, but it's 11 o'clock at night and your help desk may not be open, and they're able to get to a terminal or something to securely log in, and they could choose to remotely lock it. They could do a remote wipe, full wipe, selective wipe, or just say check in, show me where you are based on GPS coordinates. Any of those types of actions you can kind of hook into. So we're going to do a lock. And you're going to see on the right side here that it just locked my device remotely through the portal. So this is something that's not out of the box, but it's just an example of how workflow can tie in to other Symantec products. And if it needs to create a help desk ticket for you or whatever, you can use your imagination and what you can do with it. Another example I have is I showed you where you could right-click on a device and show it on Google Maps. What this workflow does, it actually looks at the GPS coordinates for all the devices, and then it plots it on Google Maps. And this is, like I said, a workflow running on the back end here. So you can see we have a lot of iPads all throughout the country, and you can see mine in Southwest Ohio is down here. I have the option to bring up the resource manager for it, or I could force like update location. So if I do this, this will show you the screen that I showed you earlier, which is the resource manager. So again, this is just an example of some cool things you can do with integrating with the platform. Someone asked about the browser I'm using. I'm working with IE. For the most part, IE says that, or sorry, the console does require IE. As I mentioned earlier, though, some of these interfaces run Silverlight, so I'm hoping over time more of this is becoming browser agnostic. But for right now, Internet Explorer is the required browser to use. Now for the workflow examples I showed, those are browser agnostic. In fact, they tend to work better in Chrome since it's, that's what Google Maps tends to like more. And someone asked if I was in Greenville. I'm not. I'm in Oxford, Ohio right now, which is near Cincinnati. So very last thing I want to show is the install of the agent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the agent here. And if I thought about this beforehand, I should have done a remote wipe or a selective wipe to remove it myself remotely, but I forgot to do that. So this is my certificate I pushed down. I'm going to remove. So let's say that this is a clean device that you need to get enrolled onto your server. And so I mentioned you have a few options. You can do it through the App Store. So if you search for Symantec, you'll see the agent in there. So this is one way of installing it. Or you can build your own agent, which is what we did. And the way you do that is you build it and then you can put it up on a web server somewhere. So I created this quick little install link. And it's going to ask me, do you want to install the agent? So I'm going to say yes. So you can see the agent is now installed on here. And then you open it up and it's going to ask you to enroll the agent. If you have authentication turned on, then the username and password is required. There's actually a DNS record that you can add to your domain to make it auto-discover what server to connect to. That speeds along the enrollment process so that the user doesn't have to know any kind of tricky configuration. Then after you put in your credentials here, you click Enroll. You can see the branding I was talking about when you build your own agent. You can have your logo at the bottom there. This is the customizable EULA that you can have in there, so you can, especially when you have personal devices connected on your network, it may be important for you to tell them that now it's going to become a managed device. They may still own it, but you're going to have certain control over it. So this is to let them know that. It's completely optional though. So once they accept that, it's next going to install Profile. This allows the server to manage the device. And then once they click done with that, the device is completely enrolled, and now it's checking into the server. It's already sent up its inventory. If they open the agent, they have immediate access to the mobile library, and they can get to any content you want. And the device is fully managed, and you can do everything with it that I just showed you. So someone asked, does the agent start with iOS when it starts? The answer is yes. So if a device gets rebooted, the agent is still running in the background, whether they open it or not, assuming you're using the in-house agent that you built yourself, or if you have someone like ITS build it for you, we can do that as well. If you're using the agent from the App Store, then they're going to have to open the agent for it to check in. So that's the big difference between the App Store agent and the one you build yourself. If you're interested in seeing this in your environment on site, you have a couple of options. We do proofs of concepts or demos on site where we can install on your servers, but it does require you to have to be a member of the Apple Developer Enterprise program, which can sometimes takes a few weeks to get in. And so you can arrange that, you can coordinate that with us and your Symantec salesperson, or we'll also have the option of doing a remote demo like this, of having the environment up in the cloud, and that way we don't have to actually install anything on site, and it's a very quick turnaround, so we can do demos like this up in the cloud. We also have a production service of this out in the cloud, so that if you do want to add mobile management to what you're doing with endpoint management today, you don't have to add all these new servers and licenses, etc., because ITS can have that back out in the cloud for you, and then it can connect into your production environment if you already have Altiera server set up. We can arrange that to happen at a technical level as well. So if you have any further questions, especially around sales or seeing a personalized demo or proof of concept, feel free to reach out to ITS. You can go to our website at itsdelivers.com and contact us there. Or I believe our phone number is 877-ALTIERIS. So I want to thank you for everyone coming and watching the demo today.